Good afternoon, Dave. How you doing?
I'm great, Dwayne. How are you today?
Not bad. Well, thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to talk about the upcoming SOA election and your president candidacy. Um, without Before getting started and diving into a few questions I had, I was hoping that first you could introduce yourself and maybe just describe your platform.
Yeah, I appreciate the opportunity, Dwayne. This is obviously I think that the key word for me is passion, right? And I think, our experiences really shape who we are, right? And I think for me, the key element to kind of my actuarial life and career was I decided when I was 13 years old to become an actuary. My dad worked for an insurance company. I figured out I was pretty good in math pretty early. He introduced me to be to his company's chief actuary. And ever since then, it's really sparked a passion, for everything I've done in this career. And obviously from kind of the work standpoint and how I've been shaped there, I've been a consulting actuary at Lewis and Ellis for 25 years. I am a health actuary. I think what's kind of helped shape where I am is I kind of work both sides of the fence. So a lot of people know me as a kind of a regulating actuary. I do a lot of work with state insurance departments, but I also do work for the insurance company side. And so that's put me in a lot of positions. I won't necessarily call them antagonistic, but I've had to work through a lot of disagreements over the years between actuaries. So I think that's really kind of helped shape my leadership style. And then the other thing I think my upbringing has really shaped too. My dad, while he was an insurance agent, he also, in the last 20 years of his career, he trained and taught people to be agents. And my mother was a school teacher for 40 years. And I've really got that in my blood too. And about 3 years ago, I started teaching health insurance class at Georgia State. And man, that has just been so rewarding, to work with the kind of the younger people trying to get into the field. And again, with my passion, it's just really kind of helped shape who I am. And so, you mentioned the word platform. I'm not crazy about that word. To me, that makes it sound like I'm going to come in and kind of force stuff on people. To me, I always like the word vision, and I've kind of promoted on LinkedIn and other forums, kind of my, four pillars. One is cultivating the next generation of actuaries. That's really the key thing to me. We are a small field. It's been getting smaller. I really think we need to, do things to cultivate the next generation. I do think, kind of the next pillar is, business innovation, getting us into new things, everyone knows we're insurance experts, but I think we need to work with other fields and really grow into other areas because I think we're perfect for it. And then I think expanding actuarial work worldwide. I think historically we've been somewhat insular in the US and Canada. We're growing, so much internationally. The SOA is the largest actuarial organization in the world, and I think we need to leverage that. And then I think kind of my last pillar is kind of building community within the SOA. I think that's why I've gotten so much out of volunteering with the SOA. As sometimes actuaries, it is somewhat an individual thing. You're taking exams by yourself for 10 years, and sometimes you kind of lose that community. And I think working together will just make the actuarial profession better.
Great. You touched on a little bit about your career and some of your volunteer activities, including the SOA and being involved at Georgia State. How has that exactly prepped you to lead the SOA if you are elected president?
Yeah, I think, I somewhat alluded to this, but I think one of the best examples was I always joked as being kind of the math actuary person. I never realized I had to learn how to get better at politics. Being a health actuary, health insurance has turned into a political animal, in the US. And I always joke something, I do a lot of work in kind of stereotypical blue states, stereotypical red states. And I always joke that if I get yelled at by both, then I'm doing something right. And so, for example, one time I was working with a state on their healthcare reform initiative. And, obviously in that world, there's a lot of stakeholders with competing priorities. And I was the facilitator. I had to, lead that group to a consensus on, how to help the state in terms of the health insurance and healthcare world. So I think, it's juggling those very opinionated people and helping to build a consensus. I think that will help me. With the SOA, there's a lot of issues that a lot of people have different comments about, and I think that'll really kind of help shape things like that.
Okay. think my next question is, so we talked a bit about your platform and you mentioned the pillars. Why do you think your platform is the best direction for the SOA going forward?
Yeah, so would I love for my vision to be the best? Absolutely. I will also say, I'm friends with Daryl and Sharon, and they are fantastic SOA volunteers, and the SOA will be in good hands regardless of what happens with the election. I said that last year. I ran last year against Amanda, and I think that really kind of helped me determined I wanted to run again, right? Like I wasn't disappointed. I knew the SOA, was in good hands. So I think, the SOA will definitely have some good vision from all of us. But I do think, as I said, I mentioned those four pillars. I do think kind of those experiences I said I've had, I do think will help shape what the SOA needs to do. As I said, I've been in, I think that's probably one of my better leadership qualities is be able to, listen to a wide range of people in a non-judgmental way and building a consensus, So, expanding on those pillars a little bit more, to me, that really the next generation one is number one. When I joined the board about 5 years ago, I was shocked to learn that about 50%, the number of exam takers dropped about 50%. And I was like, oh, that's just like a big warning sign, red bells and,
Yeah.
red flags and bells warning, that kind of thing. And so that's really what I want to focus on first, because I think we need to make sure we are entrenched as a profession that's moving forward. And if, we lose a lot of people and we don't get them back into our field, what is our profession going to be? I think the analogy I've used before is, do we really want to become the railroads, right? Very important for a long time. And now, while they're still important, you just don't deal with the rail. We're not getting on a train much anymore. We're on planes. So I kind of want to make sure, that we're set up for that. So I think that, I think that getting that reestablished and then kind of the worldwide thing, I think is so important. The world is getting, much smaller, as recently as 5 years ago, right? Every one of my coworkers lived about 20 minutes from me, right? And then things change. The technology allows us to do that. Now all of my employees are all over the country. And now I even have staff in India, which is a new thing. And I think, we're growing so much. I think we need to embrace that because there's opportunities everywhere. For actuaries, it's not just where we live. We now have the opportunity to do our work and expand into new areas. And I think we need to.
Right. Related to that question, what's your future vision for the actual profession, particularly in terms of adapting to emerging trends and risks and also evolving industry demands?
I think the SOA I believe that it's just in the DNA of the SOA to be adaptive to challenges. I think, every few years, there's always something that comes up. And I think the SOA is really good at it. I think, that they've partnered with the CAS in terms of a survey, to help address what the emerging risks are, what the ripple effects are, how they impact actuaries. So I think the SOA is always leading the way and kind of guiding, the profession through the disruption of things like artificial intelligence, obviously, right? That's the thing we all hear about. I think the SOA has been at the forefront of trying to figure out where we are going to be and how it's going to impact us as actuaries. So what I would also say too is, while I'm not necessarily a big fan of the overused term disruptor, I do think that actuaries, sometimes we kind of focus on ourselves and how to solve a problem. So I do think we need to kind of expand that and get disruptors in, or be a disruptor into another field. So again, it's just a way of kind of working with other fields to help solve these problems, these emerging risks, because I highly doubt just little old us actuaries are going to be the ones that kind of figure out AI and how it impacts financial services, but we can be a very important ingredient to that emerging risk.
Right. If you are elected president, how do you plan to engage SOA members across different stages of their career, particularly to ensure that the SOA remains relevant in support of their professional development?
Yeah, I'll kind of start that with a personal, level issue is, I am, a lot of people listening to this probably realize I'm fairly active on LinkedIn. I am a very active engager. And what I have learned from that is while we definitely can learn stuff from the actuarial organizations, it's amazing to me how much I've learned kind of one-on-one in LinkedIn, or people have posted stuff on LinkedIn and said, hey, Dave, go take a look at this. And it's stuff I've never seen before. And so I think we can kind of take that approach and expand it to kind of the organizational level. I think we need to be much more focused maybe on smaller groups and forming other smaller groups. I think sometimes you kind of get lost in the big sauce of the big organizational stuff. I still think the large meetings and the continuing ed, phenomenal. The content has been great that the SOA has done, but I think we just need to think differently and have a little bit, more of kind of like a smaller class size, right? That's why schools preach having smaller class sizes. I think you can really interact with people better and just, learn more that way.
Thank you. My next few questions, Dave, are very near and dear to me, being the current IABA president. The first one is, as the potential next SOA president, how do you plan to collaborate with organizations like the IABA to advance diversity and inclusion within the actuarial profession?
Yeah, so to me, it's always been personal for me from the viewpoint. I think what I'd like to think I'm very self-aware in that I know what I don't know. All right. Where I grew up, it was a very non-diverse background, from high school to college. And so when I joined the SOA board, I was starting to realize I'm hearing all of these experiences, and I'm like, man, I don't know much about these issues because it was just didn't impact me. And so the way I've kind of implemented the next steps on that is I want the greatest people around me. It is not an issue I can say I have dealt with, right? And so I want to work with the organizations, like yours and OLA and, Abacus Actuaries and all the other organizations, because they know the issues better than I do. I want them to inform me, and then we can work together to help, figure out what those challenges are. Because I will readily admit I am not going to have the silver bullet, because my experiences are not such that I will be able to do that. So I think it all comes down to the SOA, continuing and expanding the collaboration they've had with IABA and those other groups. We just need to keep that going.
Thank you. So with that said, what specific initiatives or policies would you champion to increase the representation of Black actuaries and other underrepresented groups within the SOA and the broader actuarial community?
Yeah, one thing I think I've seen work at a very small level, and I would love to see like the SOA and IABA try to pilot something, is kind of what I call like a double mentorship program. So, it can be challenging to get mentors involved, but what I have seen, again, at a smaller scale, is having two mentors with diverse backgrounds. And so then that way, someone, like a member of your organization would have a mentor from IABA and have a mentor from the SOA. So then that way they can kind of understand where you're coming from, where I'm coming from, and then they can kind of, take the best of both worlds. And then that way they're not just isolated in your world or isolated in our world. They get mentorship from multiple people with different backgrounds. And again, that's what we're talking about, right? Is kind of getting exposed to that diversity first. So I think kind of that double mentorship program would be something interesting. I also think, we've got to get I think the IABA leadership, I would love to see like transition into the SOA leadership, like fairly immediately. So Dwayne, when you roll off, I'd love to see you run for the SOA board, right? So a lot of the SOA board are people that have, been leaders at smaller actuarial clubs and things like that. And you guys have the experience of working in those roles and seeing what the issues are. I just, feel like as soon as you roll off, let's get involved at the broader actuarial level. So I think that would be important. And then one thing that kind of started when I was on the SOA board, and I was very proud to be a vocal proponent of it, was the SOA affiliate membership program. I think, this impacts a lot of populations, but I think we just got to hit people earlier and more often. And I think the affiliate membership is designed to get into the junior highs and high schools. As I said earlier, I decided I wanted to do this when I was 13, and that's kind of what has made me so passionate. And I want to, kind of infect people with that passion at an earlier age. So I know the affiliate membership program has been very good at generating interest at a younger age and, across kind of all populations. And I think we need to keep reinforcing that.
Well said. So, in your view, what are the most significant challenges facing diversity in the actuarial profession today, and how do you propose that SOA should address these challenges?
So I kind of alluded to this earlier, and maybe I'm speaking a little bit for myself and where I grew up and that kind of thing. I kind of grew up in Middle America. I've always worked in Middle America. I've never been outside of kind of the Oklahoma, Texas, Arkansas little area. So this may be a little just me, but the way I view it is I do think the actuarial world does make us a little individualistic early in our careers because we are so focused on ourselves, passing those exams. That is all we think about, right? For about 8 to 10 years is getting through all of those exams. And I do think that when you come out the other side, there's a little bit of a lack of connection with other actuaries in the actuarial, community. So I think that is a significant challenge. I just don't feel like a lot of actuaries think about what other people are going through. You're always so focused on yourself. So, and I think that a few years ago, the SOA did a survey where they basically discovered the younger actuaries treated the SOA as kind of a transactional relationship, and they didn't really think of that community. So I do think to really address the diversity issue is we really need to embrace those younger actuaries and get them involved at more of a group level and community level. And I think that that'll really help with the diversity issue.
Thank you. So at the end of your presidency, how do you measure success?
Yeah, it'll probably be tough, right? I think some of these issues are big picture issues, AI. I think that'll outlive us for a while, business innovation, getting involved with others. I think it'll be hard to kind of have metrics around that in 3 or 4 years. But in the short term, I think we will be able to measure some successes. And I've mentioned a few times, I think getting people into the field, that cultivating more students, attracting more students in the field, I think that is a metric we can measure. And that is something that I'm really focused on. And so I think, in 3 years, when I roll off, I think I am very hopeful that we will be able to see that we have implemented or reinforced current programs to help keep that going such that the underrepresented groups are involved. I think there's been inertia, right? We just kind of, this is our group. We need to, really focus on, as I kind of said earlier, it's not just our group anymore. We're international. We can work, even though I'm in Dallas, I can work with people anywhere. And I think that will help the underrepresented groups. And I think we can measure that. And I think the other thing we'll be able to measure too is the other thing I mentioned that was so important to me is just that membership connection. So once you're in, you're done, you're finished with exams, that kind of stuff. We need to be able to make sure we are interacting with others. And I know the SOA is doing quite a bit now with the sections and the community groups and things like that. And I think that will just make our actuarial profession better. And I think we can measure those things in terms of, measuring just in terms of how many times people interact with others at bigger levels and stuff like that.
Thanks, Dave. That concludes the list of questions I prepared for today's conversation, but I do want to thank you again for taking time out of your schedule to meet with me, and I look forward to sharing this with our members, just so they're as educated as possible going into the upcoming SOA elections which I believe the voting period is now open. So again, best of luck, and
Thank you.
thanks again for joining us.
Yeah, I really appreciate the opportunity, and I really thank you and your organization for all you do to, really promote the profession and the underrepresented groups. It's an important mission you guys have. So, thank you very much.
Right. Take care.